The padlock hangs loose on the chain, rust eating through metal that once gleamed chrome. Beyond the warped wooden door, darkness waits. This is the edge of a town that died slowly, street by street, factory by factory, until only the wind moved through empty buildings and overgrown lots. The industrial cities that powered nations through war and prosperity now stand as monuments to a different age, their bones picked clean by time and economic gravity. But sometimes, in the hollow spaces between demolition and decay, something survives intact. Sometimes a door opens and the past doesn't just whisper, it shouts. The hinges protest as the door swings inward. Sunlight cuts through decades of grime on tall windows, illuminating a scene that shouldn't exist. A workshop frozen mid-breath. Tools line the walls in perfect formation, each hanging from its designated hook. Shadows on the pegboard marking their places like chalk outlines at a crime scene. The main workbench stretches 12 feet along the north wall, its surface scarred by 70 years of honest work, but still organized with military precision. Wrenches ascend by size from left to right. Screwdrivers stand in a wooden rack, their handles worn smooth by hands that knew them by touch in the dark. A calendar hangs near the door, its pages stopped at March 1947. The air tastes of old machine oil and dust and something else. Absence. The thick, particular silence of a place where human activity simply ceased. This is not abandonment in the usual sense. No one ransacked this space. No vandals smashed windows or spray-painted walls. No scrappers stripped the copper or stole the tools. The workshop simply stopped, as if the mechanic who worked here stepped out for lunch on a spring day in 1947 and never came back. His jacket still hangs on a hook by the door, canvas stiff with age. His lunch pail sits on a shelf, the thermos inside probably still holding the ghost of coffee. On the workbench, a flathead engine lies partially disassembled, its components arranged in the order they were removed, waiting for hands that will never return to finish the job. The tools themselves tell the first story. These are not the stamped steel implements of modern big-box stores, designed for obsolescence and replacement. These are tools from the golden age of American manufacturing, when craftsmen meant something, when Snap-on was building a reputation that would last generations, when a mechanic could buy a wrench and expect to pass it down to his son. The largest wrench on the wall is a Billings 24-inch monster, its jaws capable of gripping pipe or bolt heads that modern mechanics rarely encounter. The weight of it speaks to the scale of machinery that once filled the factories nearby. Steam fittings, industrial presses, equipment built when engineers designed for permanence rather than planned obsolescence. A hand-cranked drill press stands in the corner, its cast-iron frame painted battleship gray. The chuck still holds a bit, frozen mid-job. Someone was drilling something. Someone stopped. The press itself is a marvel of pre-electric ingenuity. Its gearing precise enough to drill steel, its flywheel heavy enough to maintain momentum through the toughest material. Modern workshops have abandoned such tools, replaced them with electric and pneumatic alternatives that work faster, but lack the intimate connection between craftsman and material. With a hand-cranked press, you feel the metal resisting. You adjust pressure and speed by instinct. You learn the language of materials through your palms. The pegboard above the main bench holds a collection that would make tool collectors weep. Combination wrenches in sizes that correspond to the fractional measurements of pre-metric America. 3/8, 7/16, 15/16. The handles show wear patterns, darker where thumbs gripped, lighter where fingers wrapped. Some tools see constant use. Others wait for specific jobs. The wear patterns reveal which sizes this mechanic reached for most often, which problems he solved repeatedly. A good mechanic develops relationships with particular tools, knows their balance and heft, can grab the right one without looking. These tools were known. They were trusted. They were extensions of human intention. Micrometers and calipers rest in a wooden case, their precision surfaces still protected by a thin film of oil. These are measuring instruments from an era when tolerances mattered, when 1/1000th of an inch could mean the difference between a part that fit and a part that failed. The micrometer is a Starrett, a brand that represented the pinnacle of measurement technology in the 1940s. Its barrel shows the patina of frequent handling, but the threads still move smoothly when tested. The mechanic who owned this understood precision. He measured twice and cut once. He knew that quality work began with accurate assessment. Homemade tools hang among the commercial ones. a brake spring compressor fabricated from bar stock and threaded rod, a valve spring compressor welded from scrap metal, a specialized wrench ground down to fit a particular application. These custom tools represent the ingenuity that separated good mechanics from great ones. When you encountered a problem that standard tools couldn't solve, you made something new. You adapted. You innovated. The mechanic who worked here didn't call a supplier and order a specialty tool. He walked to the grinder or the welding torch and created what he needed. This was the practical engineering that built the industrial world. The kind of problem-solving that happened in 10,000 workshops across the country, undocumented and unsung. The workbench itself is a masterpiece of functional design. Solid maple top, 2 inches thick, its surface bearing the scars of decades. Burns from welding sparks, gouges from slipped chisels, oil stains that have penetrated deep into the wood grain. But the surface is flat and true, maintained with the same care given to the tools. A good workbench is the foundation of good work. This one was built to last generations. It has outlived its builder and will outlive anyone reading these words. The drawers below the bench top slide open with effort, their wooden runners swollen slightly with humidity. Inside, organized chaos. Bolts sorted by size in baby food jars, washers separated by diameter, cotter pins, lock washers, the small components that hold machinery together, cataloged and accessible. On the wall above the bench, technical manuals stand in a row. Motors Auto Repair Manual, 1946 edition. Audel's Automobile Guide. Factory service manuals for Ford, Chevrolet, Dodge. The spines are cracked from use, the pages dog-eared and annotated. In the margins, handwritten notes in pencil, torque specifications, timing settings, personal observations about particular engines or common problems. These manuals were not decorative. They were references consulted daily, the accumulated knowledge of an industry still young enough that one person could understand most of it. A mechanic in 1947 could reasonably expect to repair any vehicle that rolled into his shop. The technology was mechanical, comprehensible, fixable. If something broke, you could see why. If something wore out, you could replace it. The diagnostic computer had not yet arrived to place a black box between problem and solution. A photograph is tacked to the wall near the manuals. 3 men in work clothes stand in front of this very building, squinting into sunlight. The photo is black and white, slightly faded, but the pride in their postures is unmistakable. These are men who built things, fixed things, kept the machinery of civilization running. The man in the center might be the owner of this workshop. He's older than the others, his face weathered, his hands hanging at his sides like tools themselves. He wears the expression of someone who has earned his place in the world through skill and sweat. Behind the men, the building looks newer, its paint fresh, its windows intact. This was a thriving business once. This was someone's livelihood and identity. Next to the photograph, a newspaper clipping yellows behind glass. The headline announces the end of wartime production restrictions. Factories are converting back to civilian manufacturing. The economy is booming. Jobs are plentiful. The future is bright. This clipping was saved for a reason, probably because it represented hope or validation or the promise of continued prosperity. The mechanic who posted it believed in that future. He invested in tools and equipment. He organized his workspace for efficiency. He planned to be here for years. Something changed those plans. The evidence of daily life accumulates in small details. A coffee can holds pencils and marking tools, their erasers hardened to uselessness. An ashtray on the corner of the bench contains the fossils of cigarettes smoked during breaks, their ash long since desiccated to powder. A radio sits on a shelf, its bakelite case intact, its dial frozen on a frequency that no longer broadcasts. This radio played news and music while the mechanic worked. It connected this isolated workshop to the wider world. On the morning of March 15, 1947, it might have carried reports of strikes or weather or the latest developments in the Cold War that was just beginning. Then it went silent. The partially disassembled engine on the main bench poses the workshop's central mystery. It's a flathead Ford V8, probably from the early 1940s, its valve covers removed, its cylinder heads lifted off and set aside. The components are arranged in perfect order, each part positioned to show its relationship to the whole. This is how a methodical mechanic works, creating a visual map of disassembly that makes reassembly intuitive. But reassembly never happened. The engine has waited 75 years for hands that will never return. What happened to interrupt this job? Was it an emergency? An illness? Did the mechanic receive news that called him away permanently? The engine offers no answers, only the mute testimony of work interrupted. The floor around the workbench is concrete, stained dark with decades of oil drips and spills. Sawdust was scattered here once to absorb fresh spills, but it has long since been ground to dust. In one corner, a parts washer stands on sturdy legs, its basin still containing the sludge of solvent and grease. This was where components were cleaned before inspection or reassembly, where the mechanic's hands would emerge black with dissolved grime. The smell of that solvent probably permeated everything, a chemical signature that marked this as a place of serious work. Now the solvent has evaporated, leaving only residue. Tool chests line the far wall. Red paint faded to pink. These are craftsman units from the 1940s. Heavy-gauge steel with ball-bearing drawer slides that still function smoothly despite decades of neglect. Each drawer is labeled in the same careful handwriting seen in the manual margins. Sockets, punches, files, taps, and dies. Opening these drawers is like opening a time capsule. The contents are exactly as they were left, organized with the obsessive precision of someone who understood that time wasted searching for tools was time stolen from productive work. The socket set is complete, every size present, each socket showing the wear pattern of its specific applications. The files are arranged by cut and shape, from rough bastard files for rapid material removal to smooth finishing files for precision work. In the tap and die drawer, threading tools wait in their original case. These are tools for creating or repairing threads on bolts and in holes, essential equipment when replacement parts were not readily available. A mechanic in the 1940s couldn't simply order a new bolt from an online supplier with next-day delivery. If a thread was stripped, you repaired it. If you needed a custom fastener, you made it. The taps and dies in this drawer represent self-sufficiency, the ability to solve problems with available resources rather than external dependencies. This was the mindset of a generation that had survived the Depression and won a world war through ingenuity and determination. A vise is mounted at the end of the workbench, a Wilton bullet model that weighs close to 50 pounds. Its jaws are scarred from years of gripping metal, wood, and everything in between. A good vise is a mechanic's third hand, holding work steady while both human hands remain free to manipulate tools. This one has held thousands of parts, witnessed countless repairs, been the anchor point for force and precision. The handle is worn smooth, its original knurling almost polished away by palms that cranked it tight and loose countless times each day. There is something almost sacred about a well-used tool, the way it bears witness to human effort, the way it becomes a record of work performed. Above the vise, a grinder is mounted to the bench. It's a double-wheel model, one wheel for rough grinding, one for fine work. The wheels themselves are worn down from their original diameter, shaped by years of sharpening chisels, dressing mushroomed punch heads, removing burrs from cut metal. The tool rest in front of each wheel is adjusted to the precise angle the mechanic preferred, a personal setting that made his work more efficient. Every workshop develops these small customizations, adjustments that reflect individual technique and preference. This grinder was set up for one person's hands, one person's way of working. It has not been adjusted since. The walls of the workshop are lined with shelves, and the shelves are crowded with the detritus of a working life. Cans of lubricants and solvents, their labels faded but still legible. Boxes of gaskets for engines that no longer exist. Spark plugs in their original packaging. The brands long since absorbed by corporate consolidation. A collection of carburetors, each tagged with a paper label noting its application and condition. These are not random accumulations. This is inventory. Parts kept on hand because they were commonly needed, because having them available meant the difference between completing a job in an afternoon or waiting days for a supplier. One shelf holds a collection of shop manuals and parts catalogs, their pages brittle with age. These catalogs are archaeological documents now, records of what was available, what things cost, how the supply chain of mid-century America functioned. A mechanic could flip through these pages and order exactly what he needed, confident that the part would arrive and fit correctly. The parts were standardized. The quality was consistent. A Delco generator was a Delco generator, whether you bought it in Maine or California. This reliability is what made the system work, what allowed small independent shops like this one to compete and thrive. Personal items are scattered among the professional equipment. A lunch pail sits on a shelf, its metal surface dented and scratched. The thermos inside is a universal brand, its glass liner probably cracked by now from decades of temperature cycling. This lunch pail made the trip from home to workshop and back again for years, carried by the same hands that wielded the wrenches and micrometers. It represents the rhythm of working life, the daily routine of showing up, putting in the hours, going home. Next to the lunch pail, a tobacco tin holds the remains of rolling papers and loose tobacco. The mechanic rolled his own cigarettes, a common practice in an era when manufactured cigarettes were more expensive and hand-rolling was a mark of frugality or preference. The jacket hanging by the door is canvas, heavy and stiff, its pockets sagging with the weight of items left inside. Carefully checking those pockets reveals the everyday carry of a 1940s mechanic. A folding pocket knife, its blade worn thin from years of sharpening. A handful of change, including coins that are now worth more as collectibles than their face value. A small notebook with a pencil stub, its pages filled with measurements and calculations and reminders. This notebook is a window into the mechanic's mind, showing how he thought through problems, how he planned his work, what details he considered important enough to record. The windows of the workshop are tall and numerous, designed to flood the space with natural light during working hours. In an era before fluorescent fixtures became standard, good natural light was essential for precision work. These windows face north, providing consistent illumination without the harsh shadows and glare of direct sunlight. The glass is wavy with age, hand-blown rather than machine-made, each pane slightly different from its neighbors. Through the grime of decades, the view outside shows the abandoned industrial landscape, the context that explains this workshop's existence and eventual silence. The town beyond these windows was built on manufacturing. Factories produced textiles, machinery, components for larger assemblies elsewhere. The workshops that supported those factories formed an ecosystem of skilled labor. When a machine broke down on the factory floor, it came here for repair. When a foreman needed a custom part fabricated, he brought the specifications to this bench. The mechanic who worked here was part of the infrastructure that kept industry running, as essential as the power lines and water mains. His skills were valuable. His knowledge was respected. He occupied a place in the economic and social order that felt secure and permanent. That security was an illusion, though the mechanic probably didn't know it yet in March 1947. The forces that would hollow out industrial America were already in motion. Automation would reduce the need for skilled labor. Globalization would move manufacturing to cheaper markets. The interstate highway system would make it easier for factories to relocate. The small industrial cities would lose their reason for existence, and the workshops that served them would close one by one. But in 1947, those changes were still years away. The mechanic hanging his jacket on that hook and walking out the door for the last time probably thought he'd be back tomorrow. What happened to him? The question hangs in the air like the dust motes visible in the window light. Did he die suddenly, leaving the workshop frozen in mid-task? Did he receive orders to report somewhere, a last call-up from military service or a family emergency that took him away permanently? Did economic circumstances force him to seek work elsewhere, leaving the workshop behind with the intention of returning that never materialized? The building offers no answers, only evidence of absence. The tools wait. The engine waits. The coffee in the thermos has long since evaporated, but the container remains, a vessel for something that no longer exists. Walking through this space is like moving through a museum dedicated to a single life, except museums are curated and explained. This workshop explains nothing. It simply is. Every object here was chosen for a purpose, placed with intention, used with skill. The accumulation represents years of work, thousands of hours of human effort directed toward keeping machines running and solving mechanical problems. This was not glamorous work. It was not celebrated in newspapers or rewarded with prestige. It was simply necessary, the kind of labor that holds civilization together without fanfare or recognition. The men who did this work, who built their lives around skill and reliability, are mostly gone now. The generation that came of age during the Depression and fought through World War II is fading into history. Their workshops are being demolished or converted, or, in rare cases like this one, accidentally preserved through neglect. What remains is evidence of a different relationship between people and objects, a time when things were made to be repaired rather than replaced, when understanding how something worked was considered valuable knowledge, when the ability to fix what was broken was a marketable skill. This workshop represents values that feel increasingly foreign in a disposable age. The tools here were investments, purchased with the expectation that they would last a lifetime and beyond. The workbench was built to outlive its builder. The organization of the space reflects a belief that efficiency and order are virtues worth pursuing. The care taken with measurements and documentation shows respect for precision and accuracy. These are not fashionable values in an era of rapid consumption and planned obsolescence, but they are not wrong. They are simply different, rooted in economic realities and cultural assumptions that no longer apply. For men who remember when these values were common, when fathers taught sons to respect tools and take pride in work well done, this workshop is more than a historical curiosity. It is a connection to a world they recognize, a validation of skills and knowledge that modern society often dismisses as obsolete. The ability to diagnose an engine problem by sound, to fabricate a replacement part from raw stock, to repair rather than replace, these capabilities still exist in older generations. They are not obsolete. They are simply undervalued, pushed aside by economic systems that profit from consumption rather than conservation. The workshop also represents community in a way that modern work often does not. The mechanic who worked here was known in his town. People brought him their problems and trusted him to solve them. He was part of a network of skilled tradespeople who kept the machinery of daily life functioning. The baker, the electrician, the plumber, the mechanic, each was a specialist whose expertise was recognized and needed. Work was local. Relationships were face-to-face. Reputation mattered, because it was built over years of consistent performance. This social structure has largely dissolved, replaced by corporate chains and anonymous service providers and online reviews. Standing in this workshop, 75 years after it fell silent, the temptation is to romanticize what was lost. But the past was not perfect. The work was hard and often dangerous. The pay was modest. The hours were long. The mechanic who worked here probably dealt with difficult customers, struggled to make ends meet, worried about competition and changing technology. His life was not a pastoral idyll. It was a working life with all the stress and uncertainty that implies. What was different was not the absence of problems, but the presence of certain securities. Skills were portable. Work was available. A man who knew his trade could find employment. That certainty has eroded. The restoration of this workshop, if it can be called restoration, is really preservation. The goal is not to make everything look new, but to stabilize what exists, to prevent further decay while maintaining the authenticity of the space. Each tool is carefully cleaned, its surface protected against rust, but the patina of use is preserved. The workbench is treated to prevent further cracking, but the scars remain. The windows are repaired to keep out weather, but the original glass is retained. This is not a recreation or a museum display. It is the actual space, maintained as close to its original state as possible. The ethical questions around such preservation are complex. Does freezing a space and time honor the person who worked there or turn their life into a curiosity? Is it better to preserve these workshops or to let them decay naturally, returning to the earth like everything else? Who decides what is worth saving and what is not? These questions have no easy answers, but the alternative is worse. Without preservation, these spaces disappear completely, and with them goes tangible evidence of how people lived and worked. Future generations will have no way to understand the texture of daily life in the industrial era, the physical reality of work before computers and automation. The tools in this workshop still function. After 75 years of neglect, they can be cleaned and oiled and put back to use. The wrenches still turn bolts. The micrometers still measure accurately. The drill press still drills. This durability is not accidental. These tools were designed and manufactured to standards that prioritized longevity over profit margin. The companies that made them built reputations on quality that lasted generations. A mechanic could buy a Craftsman wrench with confidence that it would outlast his career. That confidence was not misplaced. The evidence hangs on the wall. Modern tools are different. They are lighter, often more ergonomic, sometimes more specialized, but they are also more disposable. Handles break. Mechanisms wear out. Replacement parts are unavailable. The economic model has shifted from selling tools that last forever to selling tools that need frequent replacement. This shift is profitable for manufacturers, but expensive for users, and wasteful for society. The tools in this workshop represent an alternative model, one that treated objects as long-term investments rather than consumables. That model is not coming back, but it is worth remembering. The partially disassembled engine on the workbench has become the workshop's unintentional centerpiece, the visual representation of work interrupted. It is tempting to complete the job, to reassemble the engine and see if it runs, to finish what was started 75 years ago. But doing so would destroy the authenticity of the scene. The engine must remain as it was left, a frozen moment in time, a question without an answer. This is the discipline of preservation, accepting incompleteness, resisting the urge to improve or finish or modernize. The workshop's location in a largely abandoned industrial town has protected it from the fate of similar spaces in more active areas. Where development pressure exists, old workshops are demolished to make way for new construction. Where economic activity continues, spaces are repurposed and updated. But in towns that died slowly, buildings often remain untouched simply because no one has a reason to disturb them. This workshop survived through irrelevance, protected by the same economic collapse that killed the community around it. There is irony in that survival, the way abandonment sometimes preserves what prosperity would destroy. Other workshops like this one exist, scattered across the industrial regions of America and Europe. Most will never be found or documented. They will decay quietly, their contents eventually succumbing to rust and rot and the inevitable entropy of neglected spaces. A few will be discovered by urban explorers or historians or developers, and decisions will be made about their fate. Some will be preserved, most will not. The workshop documented here is both unique and representative, one example of thousands, special only because someone found it and recognized its value before it was too late. The value of such spaces is not primarily monetary, though the tools and equipment have worth to collectors. The real value is educational and emotional. These workshops teach us about how work was done, how problems were solved, how people organized their professional lives. They connect us to the physical reality of the past in ways that photographs and documents cannot. Standing in this space, touching these tools, seeing the evidence of daily routine, we understand something about the past that cannot be learned from books. We feel the weight of history in a literal sense. For the target audience of this exploration, men in their 50s and beyond, the workshop resonates on a personal level. Many remember fathers or grandfathers who worked in similar spaces, who possessed similar skills, who maintained the same kind of organized efficiency. Some learned their own mechanical skills in workshops like this one, absorbing knowledge through observation and practice. The smell of machine oil, the feel of a well-balanced wrench, the satisfaction of diagnosing and fixing a problem. These are sense memories that connect directly to identity and self-worth. The modern world often makes such men feel obsolete. The skills they learned are less valued. The work they did is automated or outsourced. The pride they took in craftsmanship seems quaint in an age of mass production and planned obsolescence. But workshops like this one offer validation. They prove that the skills were real, the work was important, the values were sound, the tools still function, the methods still work. What changed was not the validity of the approach, but the economic system that valued it. There is also something deeply satisfying about the organization visible in this workshop. Every tool has its place. Every drawer is labeled, every component is sorted and accessible. This is not obsessive-compulsive disorder. This is professional efficiency, the result of years of experience teaching that time spent organizing is time saved during actual work. When a job requires a specific tool, you need to find it immediately, not waste minutes searching. The organization here represents accumulated wisdom, the optimization of workspace through trial and error and attention to detail. The workshop also demonstrates problem-solving ingenuity. The homemade tools, the custom modifications, the clever adaptations visible throughout the space show a mind that approached obstacles creatively. When a standard tool didn't fit the application, the mechanic made something that did. When a technique didn't work, he invented a new one. This kind of practical innovation happened constantly in workshops across the country. Undocumented and unpatented, the collective intelligence of skilled workers solving real problems with available resources. Modern innovation is different. It happens in research labs and corporate development centers. It is protected by intellectual property law and monetized through licensing. It is celebrated in press releases and TED Talks. But the innovation that happened in workshops like this one was just as real and often more immediately useful. It was democratic innovation, accessible to anyone with skill and determination. The mechanic who fabricated a custom tool didn't need permission or funding or a business plan. He needed a problem, some raw materials, and the knowledge to transform one into the other. The calendar frozen at March 1947 has become a symbol of the workshop's mystery. Why that date? What happened? The calendar itself is a promotional item from a local business, probably given away at the start of the year. The mechanic tore off the pages as months passed, a daily ritual that marked time's passage. January, February, March. Then the ritual stopped. The calendar has hung on the wall for 75 years, its final page yellowed and brittle, its message about the date increasingly absurd. Time moved on. The calendar did not. This disconnect between the frozen workshop and the flowing world outside creates a strange temporal vertigo. Inside these walls, it is still March 1947. The tools wait for hands that last held them when Truman was president, when the Cold War was just beginning, when television was a novelty and computers filled entire rooms. Outside, the world has transformed beyond recognition. The Soviet Union rose and fell. Men walked on the moon. The internet connected the planet. The industrial economy that created this workshop collapsed and was replaced by something else. But inside, nothing changed. The engine waits. The tools wait. Time stopped. Preservation of this space is an act of resistance against forgetting. Industrial history is often overlooked in favor of political and military narratives. The workshops and factories where ordinary people spent their working lives are demolished without documentation. The skills and knowledge of working-class communities are lost when the last practitioners die. By maintaining this workshop, by documenting its contents, by sharing its story, we push back against that erasure. We assert that this work mattered, these skills had value, these lives deserve remembering. The workshop will eventually decay despite preservation efforts. The wood will continue to dry and crack. The metal will rust. The building itself will succumb to time. Nothing lasts forever. But the documentation will remain. Photographs and measurements and written descriptions will preserve the space in another form, accessible to people who will never stand in the actual workshop. This secondary preservation is imperfect but necessary. It extends the life of the space beyond its physical existence. Walking out of the workshop and closing the door behind feels like leaving a church or a memorial. There is a sense of having witnessed something sacred, something that demands respect and reflection. The tools will continue their patient wait. The engine will remain disassembled. The calendar will stay frozen at March 1947. The workshop has become a monument to work and skill and the dignity of manual labor. It stands as evidence that people were here, that they built things and fixed things and took pride in doing both well. The broader lesson of this workshop extends beyond nostalgia or historical preservation. It challenges us to think about our relationship with objects and work. In a culture that encourages constant consumption and rapid replacement, the workshop demonstrates an alternative. Things can be built to last. Skills can be developed and valued. Work can be a source of pride rather than just a paycheck. These are not outdated ideas. They are choices about how we want to live and what we want to value. For men who grew up in an era when these values were more common, the workshop offers validation and connection. For younger generations, it offers a window into a different way of approaching work and objects. Neither perspective is complete without the other. The past was not perfect, but it was not worthless. The present has advantages, but it has also lost something valuable. The workshop stands at the intersection of these truths, a physical space that embodies both what was gained and what was lost in the transition from industrial to post-industrial society. The mechanic who worked here is gone. His name might be discoverable through property records or local histories, but his personality and thoughts and daily experiences are lost. What remains is the evidence of his work, the space he organized, the tools he used, the care he took. This evidence speaks to character and values in ways that words often cannot. The workshop is his legacy, unintentional and incomplete, but real. It says, "I was here. I did this work. I did it well." That message, simple and profound, echoes through the decades. If you've made it this far, You understand what we're trying to preserve here. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next discovery. Leave a like if this resonated with you. And drop a comment telling us about the workshops, the tools, or the craftsmen you remember. These stories matter. Let's keep them alive together.